Okay, welcome back to the second installment of the origin stories of the Accihte Music Project. It is March 3rd, 2026, and I mentioned that date because I just learned some facts earlier today. It's apparently the 333rd anniversary of the Salem witch trials, and it is also a lunar eclipse day, or scheduled for today, so to speak, which they're dubbing the blood moon, and where the term Accihte means turn red, I felt it was an appropriate time to deliver this part of this lecture series, because the term Accihte is derived from the 12,000-year-old Wolastoqey language, and it means turn red, or something to that effect. Disclaimer, I have a new neighbor, and that neighbor has a dog, and that dog is barking, and there's nothing I can do about it, and there's nowhere I can go in my apartment to escape the barking. So I'm hoping it'll just blend in, and you can just ignore it. I feel bad because I'm scaring the poor thing, but I have to talk. It's my apartment, you know. Anyway, it's okay. We'll just make it work. That's why my voice is low. I'm trying to just get this done without disturbing the dog. Okay, so I can't promise this is going to be an hour long or 2 hours long. I don't know how long this is going to take, but I really want to make sure to cover every component of this next part, because not only does it affect me personally and the trajectory of my life from many years ago, I feel I'm sharing it in honor of the people that have been unknowingly moving this story along, regular everyday people. So let me begin by saying, when my children were small, I will not lie, I was a very restless mother. I felt like I lost all my freedom when I had children, as much as I loved to be a mother, and I was a very restless person. So by the time my daughter was 4, I was chomping at the bit to get out of the house and go work somewhere or do something. So a new newspaper came to town, fortunately, and I had my eye on that. I was the editor of the school newspaper when I was in high school, and I was given awards for writing and journalism and things as I went along in school. And I always had a passion for writing. In fact, the first stories I wrote for my grandmother, just so I could make her laugh, and they were really funny, and she loved it. So that's what got me started on all of this. So this newspaper came to town, and I wanted a job. They were advertising the need for a reporter. So I composed what my editor dubbed a very bold letter, and basically demanded he give me a chance to see if I could pull this off, to be a reporter. I had no experience in journalism and no degree or education, only what I had learned in high school and my own natural talent and ambitions, of which I had many back then. It seemed like there was a fire lit under my butt at all times. I was very restless. Always wanted to just achieve things, do things, experience things, you know. I don't know why. That's just always been my way. So anyway, I wrote this letter. I ended up landing the job and met my dearest friend and mentor, Bob Rupert. I talk about him on my blog, accihte@blogspot.com. It's not a fancy website of any description. It's just or the landing page for all of this in the written form. But this lecture series will flesh it out a little bit better, so that folks who receive this information will get a better understanding of what it all means and where it all began. And so, okay, I landed a job at this newspaper, and I was thrilled and scared, and I had to give it every ounce of courage I had to face the the whole thing, because they teased me that it was, trial by fire. I had to just dive in head first, and one day you might be covering a car accident, the next day you might be covering a house fire, the next day you'll be covering a 4-H club meeting or something, like it just, whatever needed done, you did it. And Bob was very impressed with how I kept up. And what he didn't know, as I was going from assignment to assignment, I would usually be crying my eyes out in the car because I felt so overwhelmed. But I wanted to do this. I just wanted to do it. I felt like I was meant to do this. So, like I said, I gave it everything I got, or I had, or whatever. And one day I was in my office, and it was the end of the day. It was a late summer afternoon, around 5 o'clock. And it was just me, the publisher, Ken Langdon, and Bob Rupert in the office. Ken was on one side, Bob was on the other, and their offices at the back, and I was at my desk at the middle of the space, the newsroom. And all of a sudden I heard screeching tires and a collision. I grabbed my camera, I did what I knew I was, a journalist would do, headed out the door, and started snapping pictures. And I saw a young woman fly out of the back of a cab, and she was very, very, very upset. So I don't really know what precipitated this. Maybe something happened in the car. Something upset her before she even got out of the car. It might have been what precipitated the incident. I never got a chance to find out, but I most certainly give her the benefit of the doubt that something was wrong that day. But I was clueless, and I was trying to prove myself, and so I started snapping pictures. As soon as she saw me snapping pictures, she got very angry and started calling me every name in the book, like every name and then some. And then I just sort of stopped and was taken aback because I'd never had anyone tell me off like that before. But I also had to admit I kind of deserved it, because here I was exploiting this moment in her life where she was obviously in some sort of trouble, and instead of asking her if she was okay, I started exploiting that by taking her picture. And I knew the second I started snapping pictures that this is not right. I should not be doing this. I knew it. So I immediately stopped, and I let her just tear a strip off me, as they say, and she did. And it hurt bad. It cut deep. And I was holding back tears, but I knew she had every right to do that. I knew that. And so I held my ground and just took the brunt. And when she finally settled down, she went over, someone had called an ambulance, thankfully, and she was over being checked out by the ambulance worker. While she was standing there, there was a huge crowd of people around her, and she was still very upset. I very naively misjudged the whole thing, but I went over to her, and to this moment, I can't believe I did this. It was a stupid move, because I could have got hurt bad. She could have punched me right in the face, And I do still maintain I would have deserved it, but that's not necessarily how you should handle a thing like that. But anyway, I went over to show her I was going to delete the photos, and I decided then and there I was not going to run the story. I'm not going to take her picture, and I am not going to cover this incident. I don't care if I get in trouble with Bob, my editor. I will hold my ground, because it was at that moment I realized I am not a news reporter. I am a journalist, but I am not a reporter. There is a big difference. Reporters report. And in the news industry, everyone knows the whole thing that if it bleeds, it leads, right? Meaning, whatever's going on, doesn't matter what it is, if there's blood involved, it runs the front cover, or the front page, usually. Because that's what sells newspapers. Because at the end of the day, media is a business, and businesses need to sell things. And what they needed to sell back then was newspapers, and the way in which to do that was to generate intrigue, controversy, or any other thing you could possibly do to get someone to grab a newspaper on the way out the door of a convenience store. So you had to, make it catchy, so to speak. But I knew at that moment that I'm not going to make a living like this. I love to write, I love to tell stories, I love to connect with people, but I am not going to exploit them in their weakness. I'm not going to cover car accident. I just knew consciously, career-wise, I would have to have a talk with Bob and say, don't give me that type of work, because I don't want to do it. And there's a term that he introduced to me back then, We talked about this, and he said, some people they would dive right in, do whatever they could. Those people are careerists, and you're obviously not one of those. And I said, no, I'm not. I mean, I need to earn a living, trust me, but not like this. I can't do that to people. And so that was that. But in the exchange I had with this poor woman, so I went up to her and I tried to appease her, and I showed her I deleted all the photos off my camera. And she stopped and looked at me, and she spit, like hauled off and just spit in my face. And it took me aback, and I turned around, head down, tail between my legs, so as to speak, and went to the office and told Bob what happened. And he flew out there like a wildfire. He went out and like talked to the cops, talked to the girl. He was pissed because he knew that was genuine assault, and I had every legal right to press assault charges on her, which would only make her very bad situation that much worse. And that's what upset him. It's like, does she realize what she's doing? And he came in and was very upset and told me, one time someone tried to hit him with a shovel, so he knows how it feels. It's scary, but it sort of goes with the territory, Another reason why I don't want to be that type of reporter. I don't want to be assaulted. But anyway, that's a side note. But again, I maintain for the level of upset, and whatever happened to this girl, she was upset, and I should have known better. But I have a hard time reading social cues, and I didn't know it at the time, but I've learned that about myself since that day. And I just made an error in judgment clear across the board, but did my best to correct it, suffer the consequences. So back in the newsroom, Bob's like, how do you want to handle this? I'm like, what do you mean? Handle it. I'm going to wipe the spit. Hope to God she didn't give me a disease. And, and he's like, no, that's assault. That's bona fide assault. You can press charges on her for assault. What do you want to do? Right? So he thought this was going to go in a whole other direction, put the paper under a spotlight that we did not need at that time. I held the power to do all of this right in the palm of my hand. I could ruin that girl's life, and I could ruin the newspaper, and, get my legal rights put in their proper position. And I was horrified. I looked at him, I was like, what do you mean? Like, he's like, are you going to do something? Are you going to press charges? The paper doesn't need this right now. Yeah, but you have every right to, if you want to do it, I'm not pressuring you, but I just want you to know you're going to start something. Because come to find out, this young woman, who I knew by looking at her, but it was confirmed later, she was an Indigenous woman from the reserve, and she wasn't so much, well, she was young. I wouldn't say she was more than 20. And, which would create implications on several levels if I press charges on her. And I didn't even consider it. I didn't even know that it was something that would be, that would warrant charges. He's like, no, you can't spit on someone. That is an assault. And you can go and press charges on her. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to. I thought about it. I thought about it all night long. I talked to a fellow reporter about it to see what his take on the whole thing was. I was a little bit angry that the whole thing put me in the limelight, kind of in such a fast way, like just naive of me to put myself in that situation. And here it was turning into this big thing all of a sudden. But I made the decision the next day that absolutely I would not be pressing charges. As a matter of fact, one of my coworkers who worked in the graphics department knew this girl, and so I conveyed my apology to her through my coworker, because I knew the problem that was going on between this woman and me had nothing to do with her as a person and nothing to do with me. I was a victim of the money grab of the media industry by overshadowing my own sense of morality by exploiting someone in their weak moment. I would never do that outside of the realms of a paycheck. Why was I doing it now? Did I want to earn money that way? Absolutely I did not. But it put me in that position where all of a sudden I'm in a direct opposition to a young girl who I would have never had a quarrel with on any other level 9 times out of 10. And I'd grown up in the area, and I knew enough to know that our Indigenous folks already suffered enough pushback in the community that must have been what caused her to see me as more of an enemy than any type of ally, even throughout the process of me trying to apologize to her. She was having none of it, because 9 times out of 10, she's encountered a lot of negative treatment from the folks in the area due to the fact that she's Indigenous. And you call that racism, wouldn't you not? I mean, I didn't want to partake in that. And so she didn't know me, I didn't know her, but there was something about it that really bothered me, because I thought there's no reason her and I should be at odds like this, and the only reason we are is because she's gone through a lifetime of oppression, and I've gone through a lifetime of growing up in a society that's geared towards earning money any way you know how. And I didn't want to put her in that crosshairs, and she knew nothing about me and had no idea where I was coming from or how hard I'd worked to get this job, what this job meant to me, you know, all the little things that fell into place in my life to give me the privilege of having this. All that aside, I made the decision to just walk away, let her be, leave her alone, you know, like I should have done in the first place. So no charges were ever pressed on her for that. And I will not lie to you, I cried all night long that night. It hurt my feelings so bad that someone would do that to me. It hurt my pride. It made me feel so bad, like just awful. And then I was, you know, in the back of my mind hoping that I didn't get sick from that, because you never know, you know. So it was not a good thing. It was very hard to go through that. It was crushing. But pick myself up, brush myself off, and tuck that in the back of my mind. And I knew I wanted to figure out what in the hell is going on in this world that put that girl and me in such opposition. It's not common, it's not normal. This should not be happening, you know? And I was quite a fiery, politically minded gal back then, and had all kinds of ideas about what things shouldn't be. And I remember distinctly at that time, one of my favorite bands was Tom Morello and the Night Watchmen. So I listened to one of those albums, especially relentlessly, constantly fired up about politics, and I wanted to change the world, no doubt. So all that happened, I tucked it away, and 6 months later, roughly, that newspaper folded because we were bullied out of business by an oil company who had already purchased the rest of the print media in our province, which they call concentration of ownership, and it is a very bad thing. That's another story for another day. But this event set me on a path of discovery. I decided to go to university because I wanted to get a degree in English or writing or journalism or something, so I could get going on a career with my writing, because that's just what I wanted to do. I wanted to be able to use my ability to earn a living like every other person in the world. It seemed like a huge far-fetched plan at the time because I still had small kids at home. It was wildly ambitious, but I decided to just get going. And so one of the things I started to study was Canadian history. That's my starting point, where I started to, I really wanted to know what's going on in our Indigenous communities. What is the backstory? What is the history? What's happened that they're pushed back into a corner of our neighborhood, and when I encounter a girl from the reserve, that we end up like in such intense conflict so fast. There was such a disconnect there. It fueled my curiosity. So I started to study the history of our Indigenous people and all the different things that have gone on. That is available in the history books. You know, I learned about the treaties and how they were broken and how they were formed, and the early contacts with the Europeans to our Indigenous people and how all that evolved, and so on and so on and so on. So I took an active approach into studying these things, and just got going on that journey. And university took up a lot of my time and energy. I hit the books pretty hard, and maybe I shouldn't have. Maybe I should have just tempered it a little bit. But I had a fire in me that I just could not seem to just let go of, wanting to just pursue information, you know. Since those days, I found out I am neurodivergent, which makes a whole world of difference in how you handle information, but I didn't know that at the time, so it was sort of, I think that was what was fueling a lot of this extra energy that I have. You know, and it's not an easy thing to be this way, because I end up isolating myself, and I end up pushing people away, and people find it hard to be around me. And I think that's just the cost that you pay for a little extra something in this world. Or maybe there's all kinds of people like me that I don't know, but I spent a lot of time alone studying. And near the end of my studies, I ended up suffering quite a crash, because I was very unwise in some course selections right at the end. I studied astronomy, Latin American literature, and World War II. No, post-World War II, all at once. And the thing that really bothered me about all of that were the numbers, you know, juxtaposed against the stories. And Latin American literature is some of the best literature around. Like, it's got a feel and a vibe and a richness to it that is just so unique and so beautiful. And that would have been enough for one term to just dive into that, but not me. No, I have to hit 2 or 3 different things all at once and just go full force. So, and then I was studying an introduction to astronomy and learning about what makes the universe all that it is, and what we know and how we've learned what we know about the universe. And the numbers there were staggering when you consider space stuff. There's a lot of distance and a lot of math and a lot of chemical components to stars, you know, and you just learning all that stuff is overwhelming. It gives you an existential crisis, usually, I've heard, when you study astronomy. At first, it bothers people. And, okay, that in itself would have also been enough for one term. But I had the Latin American literature courses, and then I had the astronomy, and then I just, of course, dove into post-World War II. And I've talked about this text before, but one of the main texts in that course was a book about the post-World War. I think it's Tony Junt, Junt, or something like that, who wrote this book or compiled all this information. And it's a very thick book with very small font and very thin pages. But I read a good hefty portion of that book, and again, numbers. The amount of people that died during the war and the aftermath, to me, was staggering. Like, my brain couldn't comprehend it, because you spent a lot of time alone, considering numbers like what they were providing in this book. You know, these many millions of Polish died, these many millions of Germans, these many millions of French, you know, or soldiers, whatever. You know, so many people died before I even really could understand what it meant to be alive. Like, and the amount of, like, the scope of that destruction, juxtaposed against the vastness of space and the richness of the human condition, it started to chip away at my ability to hold myself together, and I started to slip. And it started in 2019, and everything just started to kind of unravel for me mentally, and I just started sort of sinking and isolating myself even further, and it just got worse and worse, and then I ended up having to drop out of one term, and I tried again, a second term, and everything spiraled out of control even further, and I ended up dropping out of a second term. So after I had a whole, 6 years worth of, like I would take 3 or 4 courses per term, so 2 terms per year, so you add that up over how many years. Most of my grades were A's, B's, C's, maybe the occasion. I've never gotten a D, actually, and I only ever failed one course, and that was French, before all of this happened. But after that happened, my transcripts now reflect that I dropped out of 8 courses, all F's. So my university experience is still an ongoing challenge. I'm not yet quite finished, but I'm very close. But I am leery to go back because I'm scared I'm going to have another meltdown. But anyway, I did have a meltdown, and it was in the time frame of this meltdown that I had the experience that I discussed in the first lecture that I gave. So I don't want to get into all of that. But throughout the course of my life, ever since I was a little girl, on up till now, certain things would sort of stick in the back of my mind, and I just hold on to them. But this experience was adding to the urgency I had. I just felt like I was reaching for something, like feeling like I'm on the brink of a discovery of some kind that's going to tie everything together for me. Because I was just desperate to figure out who I am, where do I fit in this world, who's my family, like what's all of this about? And there was one song in particular that always stuck in my mind, and I wrote about it on my blog, and it's called Voice of Many Waters. It's a Christian song. It's quite fiery at the beginning, but there's this little part in the middle where the guy says something about the word. And he said something about you're not in the winner's circle, you are in the winner, talking about the bride of Christ and all of that. And that fascinated me because I've always loved the idea of being a bride, a big white wedding dress with the veil and all that stuff. I used to flip through wedding magazines when I was younger and just dreamt of that day. That day it's just a fairy tale, but, I like that stuff. I will admit it. And so that's why it stuck with me. I always thought about that. I was like, why are they, I don't quite understand where all this all fits in the Christian thing, especially based on experiences I've had with church and all the different things that go on there. And it's like, what is this about? But that always stuck with me. So, stuck in the back of my mind. Okay. And further down the line, after we lived at Stormcrow, we ended up moving into a house that my mother owned, and we rented from her, and they allowed me to paint it purple. Well, the significance of that is that that house was possibly part of the Underground Railroad. It's never been confirmed, but it's quite suspiciously, accurate, because there's a sub-basement and another little tunnel that leads out to a waterway, and the waterway leads out to the Woolstook River. So I lived at that house for quite a long time, and I spent a lot of time thinking about this, and I didn't know back then that I had a sensitivity to spiritual energy, but I always felt, something strange in that house, like something kind of calling out to me or trying to speak to me, or just something. And knowing it could have been part of the Underground Railroad, thinking about those rooms down, there's hidden rooms, and all these different things that, made you wonder. And I got thinking about that, and the part that bothered me the most was if some black people had to hide there in the wintertime, it would be freezing cold. So it was only a way station. It was certainly no proper shelter. And I got thinking, if they ended up at that house, went out and escaped down through the river eventually ends up in St. John, and from St. John they could take a boat of some kind to Nova Scotia. So I thought about that and just how brutal our winters are, and it grieved me. I thought about it a lot. And so circumstances evolve. We end up moving from that house, and we moved to the city of St. John, my family and I, and we eventually ended up living in a place uptown on the corner of Pitt and Princess Street in St. John, New Brunswick. And this is just how these details correlate, but through the course of events, we ended up buying a new car. And this new car came with a subscription to Sirius Radio. And so one day we all got in the car, and my now, unfortunately, ex-husband turned on the radio, and as soon as he did, it was on a whatever metal station he liked to listen to, and I heard the sound of the band Zeal and Ardor. And I don't know what it was exactly, but it caught my attention immediately. And I just was like looking at my husband and ex-husband, and I looked at him like, what is this? Like, I immediately, like, disturbed by it. Like, not disturbed, like, troubled, like, in a bad way, but just heard something, and it immediately, that was so different than what I had ever experienced before. Just in, like, one flash of sound, it caught my attention. And I said, what is this? And he told me it's the band Zeal and Ardor, and he'd been listening to it a little bit, and, told me what he knew about it. And I said, shut it off, I don't want to hear it, just shut it off. And he said, he was like, why, what's going on? I was like, just shut it off, I should not listen to this, I know I shouldn't. And he's like, well, okay, and he put something else on. And then I asked him, no, turn it back on again. And he's like, are you sure? I said, yes, I'm sure, but I tell you, mark my words, mark them now, mark my words. This band, something about what's going on in this music is going to change my life. And I said those words, clear and precise to him. I made note of the fact that there's something in this that's speaking to me right off the bat. Like, okay. So I had all of this going on with me. So what happened after? So I started to dig into the band Zeal and Ardor, and I was immediately enthralled, especially by the lead singer, because he seemed to be so viscerally alive. Like, I remember making a bit of a comment about it on my social media. I posted a picture of him and tagged him in the band, and I was a huge fan back then. And I was like, this guy actually seems to have a pulse. Because back then it seemed to me like the whole world seemed to be kind of like hushed into some sort of stupor and some sort of lull. And it just seemed like nobody was really alive, and everyone was just kind of going through the motions of the day. But this guy seemed to me like he was actually awake. He's actually like got something to say. He's actually like alert and alive, and And so I was immediately pulled in, and I talked about this band all the time. I told anyone I could think of about this band. I listened to the music relentlessly. I watched, there's one concert in particular, I think it's in Auckland, I'm not sure, or something like that. Over and over, I studied and studied and studied this music. Something in it was calling to something, and I just thought, what is this? What is this? But what really, in the back of my mind, one of the details, there were several that caught my attention, was that Mr. Gagno's last name is Gagno. Gagno means wind, obviously, English translation from French. And I noticed one of his album covers were the exact same shade of purple that I painted the house I was living in prior to this new place, in conjunction with the Underground Railroad. And I knew this music was veering into the concept of slavery and upturning the idea of turning to Jesus, instead turning to Satan in quest for freedom. And that immediately alarmed me, because I've grown up in a Christian faith and household and world, side of the world, and I've never heard anything real good about Satan, So I was like, well, that's a tricky topic. I wonder what he's going to do with that, So that's where I first started to get intrigued by this music. And I dove into it head first, and I was a huge fan, huge. I loved it, but found out, not through various means, that I wasn't really the type of fan that they were looking for at first. And then, some things happened there, and I'm just not the type of gal that I don't think they wanted my attention, and But I've never been to a metal concert in my entire life. The biggest concert I've been to is a Crash Test Dummies and Jeremy Dutcher, which is like the Imperial Theater in St. John, which is the same theater Tom Morello played in, incidentally, not too long ago. So it's wonderful how all that lines up. Crash Test Dummies are a Canadian band, and Jeremy Dutcher is, Jeremy Dutcher. Google it. But so that's the angle I had with this music, and I thought, there's something in this music. He's onto something. He's onto something. He could change the whole world with this concept. If he took it in the right direction, this could really upturn the narrative of the oppression black people are experiencing. And I was very much intrigued by that topic. After living in the house, experiencing what I experienced, and one of my favorite musicians of all time is Nina Simone, and I always knew where she stood on things. I knew that she was very concerned for the plight of black people in the United States and felt that, violence wasn't out of the equation. And, and, and that's where, people thought she became a little too radical. And, if women go too far in that direction, they get shunned, treated like they're crazy and all this stuff. But I love Nina Simone, and her music is so powerful. And I knew there's something in her music too. Like, this is not just somebody putting in time based on a hobby. When people make music like Jeremy Dutcher makes, and like Nina Simone makes, and like the band Zeal and Ardor make, it's not just music. In my opinion, it's heeding a calling within you that is put there for a reason, and that becomes more evident to me every single day. So I dove into the music of Zeal and Ardor, and started swimming around in that particular pond for quite a while, and my personal life just got worse and worse and worse and worse. And maybe there's a coincidence going on there, or maybe not. I don't know. But my life just started to fall completely apart. And right on the heels of the pandemic, my marriage fell apart. And I discussed all that in the first installment of this lecture series. I do not want to get into it again, but I hope that you can remember. If you can't, maybe just go listen to it. But I went through quite a huge personal upheaval. But in that time frame, I started to investigate music, as I've said. And it seemed to me that I was drawn to a certain type of rhythm and a certain type of drumming. And this particular sound that one of the songs of the Zeal and Ardor features is a sound of chains, like periodically sounding like a chain gang marching kind of a thing. So that's something to note. But when I was working in my art studio, and as I said in my first video, I started to feel the energy of children come through my paintings somehow. It's very hard to explain that if you don't experience it yourself. It's just something I was feeling and experiencing on a spiritual level. Right up the street from me, they were tearing down the Gothic Arches Cathedral, and all this stuff was amping up and amping up and amping up. And one of the songs that I felt to just keep playing again and again and again was the song Children's Summons by Zeal and Ardor. And I remember making this little reel video back then, and I had made it red and black mostly. I had a lot of red candles, a lot of red lights. I didn't really consciously realize I was doing it, but I feel like I must have been casting spells back then. Because this one night in particular, I kept playing the song, and I made this little video and applied this song to that video. And then I just kind of looked up at the ceiling, and I looked around, and I felt like I could feel spirit just swirling through the room. And I captured that moment in this video, and I posted it on my social media. And I believe it was around that same time frame that the band Zeal and Ardor took a little bit of note of me in my posts and my work. And so they were aware of me way early on, and that's a good thing, I think. But they had no idea what I was experiencing, and I had no idea what I was experiencing. I just knew something seemed to be triggered in the spirit realm, and this song was something that I just felt drawn to listen to. And that's how the process began. I just started following my heart. I put everything else aside. Excuse me for a second. I put everything else aside and just dove into music. And so that song was one of them. Just feeling these children, this energy, all this stuff going on. And I stuck with it, 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 and I stuck with it until I got to a point where I felt like something is calling to something else. Something is calling to something else. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I'm not going to discuss personal stuff that went on in that time frame, but there were moments where what I was going through would cause me to feel such anger. It was like ire, like a murderous rage was coursing through my system. And an urgency that I can't even articulate. And it made me very hard to be around. I was having no if anyone approached me, I basically bit their hand off. Because I knew I was onto something. I knew, based on this experience with this lady, all the stuff that brought me to this moment, it had its correlations. Like it was dovetailing one thing after another, after another, after another, and leading me to this moment where this music was speaking to me in such a powerful way. And so eventually, as I said, I stumbled upon Jeremy Dutcher. And the discovery of this particular component is where, I don't know, the folks from the band Zeal and Ardor, we've had a bit of a love-hate thing going on, but for whatever reason, they have never wanted me to pursue this line of thinking or this project in the way that I have, or saw any merit in it of any kind, either, as far as I can tell. But I've stuck with it due to the fact that this doesn't just start in 2020 when I first heard Zeal and Ardor. This experience, sorry for that little clicky sound. This experience goes way back, like the origins of it. That's why I call it the Origins lecture series. And I'm talking like 20 years or more. In one of his songs, again, talks about sitting here waiting for 13 years, and considers himself to have suffered quite a lot, waiting for something to happen, I guess. Well, I've been waiting for at least 7 or 8 years longer for these events to come to fruition, as far as I can tell. So I know how that feels. I know that a person wants something to come out of their difficulties, and so for me, this project is what has been what should I say, the reward for all of this that I've given to myself, if no one else. But I do hope that in sharing it, it does what it's meant to do for someone else. I'm not sure, but I discovered Jeremy's music, and then I discovered the song Honor Song, and this is where things get really, really interesting. And I approach this as on a more of an anthropological or a research-based slant to this. As much as I love the music of both of these music projects, this isn't because I'm a fan or not a fan, whatever the case may be. This is something I noticed and observed when it comes to symbols within this music and within these publications these artists have put forth. So the Zeal and Ardor symbol is a circle with a sigil, or symbol, whatever you call it, of Lucifer, which most people know what that looks like. But the circle is the significant part right now for this particular part of the story. And I noticed Jeremy Dutcher's symbol for his song, Honor Song, is also a circle. And in Jeremy Dutcher's symbol, there's a piano positioned directly opposite of another piano, and some markings to create what looks like a pathway from the one piano to the next. And that image represented what seemed to be happening for me and what I was observing, because in one of Zeal and Ardor's songs, and to this moment I don't know specifically which one, I have never taken the time to figure it out because I shied away from listening to Zeal and Ardor's music after all of this unfolded, because regardless of anyone else's opinion, for me, I feel there's a power to it that I'm not sure I know what to do with. And I don't know if it's good, I don't know if it's bad, but I know that I am leery to grapple with it, you know? Based on all the stuff that's happened to me since that fateful day I heard them on Sirius Radio. But one of Zeal and Ardor's songs has the sound of a chain, you know, at a certain intervals, as I've said. Well, the song Honor Song, I discovered, also has that exact same sound, or one that's very similar in that song, but the one in Zeal and Ardor represents, you know, a sound representational of slavery, you know, chains, being chained, marching with chains on, and all that stuff, and it would represent oppression and really bad things. It connotates all of that one sound. But in Jeremy Dutcher's song, he has that exact same sound, but it connotates all the exact opposite. It connotates strength, freedom, honor, all this stuff. So one is over there in Switzerland making a song like this, and it's representing one particular ill of society that's affecting non-white people. And then you've got Jeremy Dutcher over here in New Brunswick, Canada, composing this song, or I don't think he wrote the song. I think it's just a culturally based song that is available for whoever wants to sing it. And with honor, I mean, it's an honor song. He's over here in New Brunswick singing that song, and I think that both of those songs were put out right around 2017, thereabouts. Now, in no way, shape, or form am I suggesting either one is copying off the other, because there's no way that Zeal and Ardor would have ever known about Jeremy Dutcher. Jeremy Dutcher was not a very big name back then, although he's certainly come a long way since those days, thankfully, wonderfully, as Zeal and Ardor has too, in their own way. But there's no correlation between their music otherwise. Like, there's no show where one would be playing and the other. I mean, it's just polar opposite music, polar opposite scene, polar opposite shows, polar opposite audience. Nothing to correlate them to suggest for a second that they would copy this stuff off each other. I'm not saying that at all. In fact, that's the exact opposite of what I'm saying. What I'm saying is both artists, both, you know, followed whatever was in their hearts to create this music, to put it forth into the world in the direction it was going. One was going in this way, one was going the other way, you know? But here we are, and I was able to stitch those sounds and those rhythms together and find this moment of a clash from one culture to the next within one particular sound. And that fascinated me. That was my eureka moment. And that's when I said, aha, I've got it, that's it. And that is when I knew that I should start playing Jeremy Dutcher's music, and that is when I knew that I should take my speaker down to the water and do my best to communicate with the spirit realm and these children and get them back home somewhere where they're better off than what they were, and I've explained all that. And I don't really need anyone to believe me, and I don't really mind if people think this is a bit far-fetched, but there is academic components to this, that it's not about like suggestion or a mystical concept. It's literally, you can sit down and hear it yourself. You'll have to go through Zeal and Ardor's music to find the right song. I can't remember which album it's on, because either Devil is Fine or the other one. I don't know. I'm leery to get too much of Zeal and Ardor in my head, I will be honest with you. But anyway, and then Jeremy Dutcher's honor song. And maybe I'll provide links to them with this video, or maybe I'll give you an assignment and you go find the songs and see if you can hear what I hear. Because I'm not just making this up. It's discernible and audible and traceable and knowable by anyone who takes the time to do so. So this isn't just some airy-fairy concept I'm throwing out there. This is like bricks and mortar kind of stuff, in my opinion. So the image on Jeremy Dutcher's honor song symbol pretty much shows what happened in the spirit realm. It's like one music source created its music and through time and space weaved itself with another source on the other side of the planet. And between the two, I was able to help achieve a certain goal to do what I feel has been accomplished in the Accihte Music Project with, in terms of the residential school children in the unmarked graves that were discovered in 2020. And so I find that to be profound because it all kicked off with the song Children's Summons. So Children's Summons over here on one side with with Zeal and Ardor. And then on the other side, we've got Honor Song by Jeremy Dutcher. And if you stop, think about all that music encompasses, all the different things that would, in a musical sense, that would occur in between those two sounds and those two concepts, we're able to create some sort of bridge from one point to the other to achieve this goal. And that is the most profoundly amazing thing I've ever experienced in my life, to be able to piece that together, to appease my own understanding of nothing else. But I don't know, I love that it's not just me, like anyone could take a look and see this if they want to. But going back to that song where it talks about the bride and the word or whatever, where it says you're not in the winner's circle, you are the winner. I mean, that's all, to me, it's like, if I hadn't heard that song, the concept of these circles wouldn't really be something I pay attention to. And as well as a whole bunch of other concepts that song introduced to me when I was very young. But what makes this even more interesting is this is stuff I wanted to impart to the folks in Zeal and Ardor, kind of like naively thinking I could just crash a party somewhere and take 5 minutes of their time and show them like, hey, do you guys realize this is going on in your work? It never ever went that simple. In fact, it was like a bomb went off as soon as we made any form of connection, and it turned quite volatile. And I was not doing well when all of this started, and I'm doing much better now, but it was almost like there were forces at work trying to prevent this connection to be made. And I think that's what's the root cause of all the negative stuff that happened, but I don't want to really dwell on that. I prefer to focus on the miraculous nature of it, because to me, based on all the other stuff that I've gone through to get me to this point, I feel it's miraculous. I feel like it's a very significant thing to have discovered. And maybe I'm the only one, or maybe not, I don't know, but since I'm the artist behind this project, I'm just going to handle it the way I want to handle it and let the chips fall where they may. But that's what happened. And so that song by the Yancey Brothers about the bride and the winner's circle, and then we've got Zeal and Ardor's circle, we've got Jeremy Dutcher's circle, and then we've got all this information. And the other thing that fascinates me is the symbol of this band, Zeal and Ardor, as I've said, is the symbol of Lucifer or Baphomet. I don't know, whatever. I'm not real into all this stuff. This is not my wheelhouse. These are just things that became evident to me that I noticed in terms of like I don't study a lot of alternative religions or anything like that. Like, I know it's big over in Europe, but I've never really dove into all that. Never got into it. But anyway, what I noticed is we're talking about cultural appropriation. How far back does that symbol go? I don't know. But when I look at it, all I see is an upside down teepee. And I look at it, and the band's got Zeal and Ardor, Z and A, and so the Z is up top and the A is at the bottom. Ever since I first saw that, I just want to spin it around. Just spin it around. It's upside down. Your symbol's upside down. It's just like so obvious to me that I'm very annoying about it and insistent. Like, it's just upside down. I'm sorry, but it is. Because what I see, first of all, A goes alpha. A would be at the top. Z would be at the bottom. Maybe this wouldn't have been evident to me if the letters weren't there, but they are there. So the first thing I want to do is organize them properly, because I have like this fetish to organize things for some reason. It goes along with neurodivergence, I guess. I don't know. But, so if you flip it upside down, to me then it becomes upside right. Then it just looks like a teepee. It looks exactly like a teepee. So it made me wonder, did the whole Satanist crowd, or however you might describe that symbol in its ancient form, borrow that from our indigenous people, so to speak? Or is it just a coincidence? Because that is a really big coincidence that looks like a teepee. Even like with the little curl and everything, it looks like smoke. And, the doorways, the little crossover sticks. And I did a little illustration of this and I posted it on my Instagram, where I took the symbol of Zillenarder, spun it around, and digitally drew it into a little teepee. It's so simple to see it. I mean, that's all I see when I see that symbol. So I got thinking about that, and in the spirit realm, I wonder if children saw that symbol and heard him singing children's summons and all the other chants and polytechnic, polyrhythm, blah, blah, blah. I ain't a musician. I do not know the terminology in that sense. What would they want? What would they think? What would they think when they heard this man saying these words that seem to be effectively summoning children, when they saw him in that symbol, but it's upside down? It makes me think. I just get thinking, like, what would they think? And I always got the impression they were scared of him and not sure if they could trust him. And I begged him, just turn it upside down just for a little while so they can see it upside down. And then they'll see it's a teepee, and maybe they'll trust you. And, you have to have a big belief in the spirit realm to take me seriously on that level. But that's what I asked. That's what I wanted. I have no right to demand anything per se, but I begged them to do that. I had it all mapped out. Like, if you guys do this, this can happen, and this will happen, and this will happen, and this will happen, and then they were having none of it. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to know this. They are not a fan of the Accihte music project, as far as I could tell. I could be wrong, but it's not gone smoothly. But I think about these children, and I think, well, you're the one that summoned them. Don't you think you're the one that should be the one to help them now that they're here and you have their attention? I mean, I got quite upset about all of this. I don't know if anyone else would, but I did. So all these things together, that's where the band Zillenarder fits in with the Accihte Music Project. And that's why I say it's pivotal. It's what started this journey. That first initial moment I heard them on Sirius Radio, I made sure to say out loud, this is going to do something that's going to change my life. And sure enough, it definitely has, in 1,000 different ways. And that exchange with the girl who spit in my face taught me humility, it taught me conviction, it taught me morality, ethics, and all that stuff. And to not chase a dollar at the sake of someone else's vulnerability. That's something that, if that hadn't happened, I might have taken a career path where I did chase these news stories where people are bleeding and hurt and vulnerable, and made a living off that. And I think that the older I got, I think I would have had a real problem with making money that way. And so, it's been a huge component to what's changed my character, and it was hard to go through that, no doubt about it, but it is the building blocks. That event is the building blocks. And so this project is in, honor of that woman, whoever she was, whatever she went through that day, whatever has been going on. I want to heal that rift somehow and make it so when a woman like that confronts a woman like me, we don't automatically end up in like such intense conflict where I could have really caused her a lot of problems, and she could have like knocked my teeth out, right? And is it like a general understood thing? If you piss off one of the folks on the reserve, you're going to piss them all off, and nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. But furthermore, I knew deep down we had Native heritage, so I knew somewhere along the line we might even be related. We should be sisters. We should not be enemies, And I've been to the reserve down towards the Woodstock, New Brunswick area, and the people there are some of the sweetest, most mild-mannered, wonderful, creative souls I have ever had the experience of being around. It's palpable. It's palpable. And I have deep respect. And, so I grew up around these folks. So that's the main component. There was something else I wanted to say. I'm trying to think. Just 1 minute. I'm going to pause this and see if I can remember. I'll be right back. Not that you'll know that I paused it, but I'm going to. Okay, I should have turned that little clicky sound off, but this is just a very soft launching raw format recording, by the way. So the thing I wanted to mention is this reserve is located along the lower branch of the Williston River, which is the river that is connected to the city of St. John, where I took my little lantern speaker and played Jeremy Dutcher's music, as I mentioned in my previous video. So it's all correlative, it's all connected. The river is the vein of commonality in this story. As a matter of fact, the band Zill and Artist sings about blood in the river. And again, blood is red, it's the red moon. Accihte means turn red, so I thought this is a very appropriate time to tell this story. So I'm sure I've forgotten components of it, but as I've said before, it is vast. It is a huge story, and this is only one layer of many, many layers. But one thing I do want to mention, in case I don't get around to doing a third one, because I'm not sure I will, I'm not sure that I won't. I'm going to do it if I feel I should, and if not, I won't. But I want to mention another thing that caused me to take this very seriously is before my grandmother passed away, she kept having dreams or visions of children out in the snow. She was elderly, and, maybe she was making it up, or maybe she wasn't. Again, I erred on the side of caution. Once I heard this, my mother told me that somewhere near the early stages of this project, and that really was a red flag for me, and I said, wait, are you telling me my grandmother had visions or dreams of young children being stuck out in the elements, out in the snow in the winter? And she said, yes, she used to talk about it all the time. She said she could hear children crying, and that she saw them outside, and they're trapped in the snow, and on and on and on like that. And so, like, okay, well, I knew my grandmother to be an honest woman, and, I don't think she'd make that up. So whatever it was that was bringing that information to her awareness, to the point where she was reacting to it, I took it seriously. Because she didn't know a thing about this project. She didn't know a thing about what I was going through. But yet, she seemed to be picking up on something as well. So that's why I really dove into this and took it seriously. So, it is a passion project in honor of all the people that have crossed my path to help me form this story, to tell it. From the girl who spit on my face, Bob Rupert, the band Zill and Artist, Jeremy Dutcher, and many folks in between. I developed this project for that reason, because I am so grateful that we have artists in the world who create music from their hearts, because when you do, it does matter. It matters. It matters. And if you can't see that by now, I don't think there's anything I could say that would help you to see it, but if you do see it, I would be really glad about that. So I'm going to end this here, and I thank you so much for sticking around. If you want to contact me, my email is accihte. Am I spelling that right? No. It's Accihte, ACCHITE @gmail.com. I have a blog. I'm not promoting this real strong or anything. This is just getting it down so I can get it out of my mind and get it available to the folks who are interested. So thank you so much, and take care of each other, and much love to you, and I wish you peace and joy, and I just hope for better days, and I denounce war. All right, much love.